Okay, The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel. A great read this book was. It's been a little while. I wish I could give you a more thorough review on it, but our author in this case is a part of the story. His name is Michael Finkel. I'm not spoiling anything with this. It's on the back of the book, but the story here is that there's a hermit, a man that has lived in the northeastern Maine forest for almost 30 years alone. He has not spoken to a single individual in that time. After that period of time passes, 3 decades, he's caught. He is stealing food from a local it's like a youth camp or something like that. It's been a little while since I read it, but he gets caught by the police. But for that 30 years, it was like a legend in the area that there was this hermit that existed in Maine that would go in and out of people's vacation homes and summer homes and these cabin areas that people would trip and camp. He went in, he took what he needed, and then he put everything back in its place. He had these values, and it was this legend because nobody saw him. So nobody knew where the food was going. They just assumed it was somebody. He did come in contact with one person in that 30 years. It was a hiker that stumbled on his camp. He's lived in these woods for that entire time. He took care of all of his own needs and life, which some people are a little skeptical of. But me personally, I think he did accomplish it because in his interviews after he's caught with our author, Michael Finkel, which is the entirety of this book, it's about what he learned by being by himself for that period of time. It's very interesting. We'll get there in a minute, but he sees one person and they say hello. He's like, hi. And that person confirmed and knew of the hermit's story and saw the hermit, but chose not to reveal his location because he wanted to respect his privacy. This person was later interviewed about that encounter, and he said, I wanted to respect the fact that he wanted a private life, and so I didn't tell anybody. He thought that incorrectly that he may have been a veteran that wanted his own peace and live in this area by himself. But he wasn't. He wanted that solitude voluntarily. He left when he was 20-something years old, and they caught him when he's almost 50 or 50, or a little bit older than 50. I can't quite remember. But so he gets put in jail in Maine, and this guy contacts him amongst thousands of letters from people all around the world trying to speak to this last true hermit, the only person on the earth that hasn't spoken to somebody for that long of a period of time that's still alive and can be talked to and interviewed. And so for some reason, this character, his name is Knight, is his last name, Knight, Christopher Knight, if I remember correctly. He contacts Michael Finkel. He starts to respond to Michael's letters from jail. And they start this relationship, and Michael flies from the west side of the country to Maine over many trips and talks to Michael in hour increments, and they write by letter, and he asks him a lot of questions about his experiences. And some of the things that stuck out to me, this book is about it's very philosophical, but it's like a book on Stoicism, but through story, because we have this amazing story of this Christopher Knight that lived in the woods. What can we take from that? So these lessons that you would get in a book of Stoicism, for example, but overlaid onto a story. So it's like the best of both worlds. The readability was great. The author, Michael Finkel, did a great job of writing the story well, where it kept your interest, and it actually started with his capture and then went through the whole what he learned. So that was a great timeline that I enjoyed. A lot of the characters in the story, like the police officer that arrests him, they feel sort of like they're taking away the only thing that he cared about. He wanted privacy, and here we are stripping him of that. And then some people are conflicted as to whether or not he really committed a crime. I mean, yeah, he took people's food, but no one was hurt. But then the other side of the coin is people lived in fear. Some people lived in fear for many years because of him. So was that a crime? So it's all this conflict and extra story on top of some of these Stoic philosophies that you get, that Michael Finkel gets from Christopher in these interviews. And so I wrote down a lot, and I won't share it all, but that was my overarching, I love books about Stoicism, but what I found interesting about this was it's in novel format almost. I mean, yeah, it's all true and it's a nonfiction story, but you're getting these lessons through the eyes of a character and somebody that's lived in that environment of being alone in solitude for a prolonged period of time. You're seeing it for the first time practically in reality, and it was really unique. I mean, this is one of the most unique books I've read. Some people debate too the mystery of whether or not he had help, because could you really survive the harsh winters in Maine? He told the journalist Michael Finkel, the author too, he told him that he would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and force himself to move his body during the winter so that he wouldn't freeze to death, because you start to sweat in your sleep, and so if you don't get up, you're going to freeze and you'll die. So it was very interesting. And at the end, there's a little bit about the court trial, and then I won't reveal what happens. I'll let you read it. But one of the things that I wrote down that was interesting was about the relationship that the author shared with Christopher. I thought it was really great. And that most of us feel like something is missing and it's our job to seek it. But what the author wrote was that life isn't about seeking it endlessly. It's about learning to live with the missing parts. And basically, they came to the conclusion, the author and Christopher, is that solitude's just acceptance. It's all about just being, and not wanting or yearning, just accepting what it is. So I thought that was a really good end to the story. And I mean, if you've read this book, you'll agree the readability's there. The story is extremely entertaining, and the rereadability is there too. And I love a good story, nonfiction, where you get lessons along the way. And I love it when it's done practically by somebody that actually experienced it. It's not a teacher that hasn't lived it. I mean, this person lived it. Christopher Knight lived it. And then he suffered afterwards as a consequence. So if you haven't read it, it's very interesting. It'll make you think about your life. It'll make you think about the way you live, and all the noise that we live amongst compared to what you don't have to endure on a daily basis. So if you haven't read it, pick it up. One of the best I've read this year, The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel.